Hello, so this is my first YouTube upload, and what today we're going to be talking about is what could end up being a quite substantial severe weather outbreak over the state of Mississippi tomorrow. Really across the entire state of Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, especially western Alabama, but really all of Alabama is under a severe threat. So we can look and see this is severe weather that's projected. This model is a couple hours old, but it projects the severe weather that's ongoing now across portions of the south central United States, and we can see that over tonight and into the morning, this squall line begins to form. And this is the HRRR model. We'll be going over others soon, but so we're going to go southeastern United States, and we're going to see this squall line, and we'll show you why it does what it does in a second, but we can see that this squall line, it really begins to ramp up in intensity, and we can see how it can maybe see some bowing segments starting to form. Maybe some embedded supercell structures. What is supercell structures? What a supercell is it is a storm with a sustained rotating updraft. And when I mean embedded, I mean while that storm has a rotating updraft, it is basically within a line of storms. So we can see this particular model shows a line of storms with southern extent maybe having some more supercell characteristics. And especially with these supercell characteristic storms, they could be capable of strong tornadoes because the shear, especially at the low levels, is very favorable for strong tornadoes. But there's a couple things that still have to be worked out. So, well, first we're going to look at the 850 millibar height winds, which basically is a good way to look at the low level jet, which shows the low level winds, and we can really allows us to get a good idea at the tornado potential. If you don't have a strong low-level jet, it's very difficult to get a tornado outbreak. And we can see that as we move into the afternoon, and just for reference, this is around peak heating. I believe it's around 2 o'clock. We're at 21Z, I believe that is about 2 o'clock. We're going to, really it looks to be happening in Alabama and Mississippi right now, so we're going to take a zoom in there and put us onto the temperature outlook. So we're going to switch it back to there. And we are going to see how 2 o'clock this storm enters Mississippi, and you can see, you really can get a good look at those supercells in the line I'm circling there. You can kind of see they try and form a hook shape. And now what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out a little bit more, take a little more of go back to a broader look at this setup. And yeah, so you can see there was a very strong low-level jet. And so now we're going to take a look at the temperatures. We're going to see how warm it's going to get, just try and see how much instability there's going to be ahead of these line of storms. We're going to see that it gets up very warm into the 70s and even 80s. So you would think this means there's a lot of instability. However, when you look at the dew points, we're going to see that they start to mix out some in the afternoon. So 60s dew points is favorable for severe weather, but especially this close to the Gulf Coast, you really want more like mid and upper 60s dew points. And you can see that tries to develop right ahead of the squall, but the moisture is not as good as what you would expect for what the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted as a moderate risk. And that's not like hating on the SPC in any sort of way. It's just like, the different sort of dynamic setups that goes into this. So we can see the moisture's there. It's kind of there, but it's not like an A+ by any means. And here's what's really going to be limiting the instability for this setup. And I'll show you what the instability being limited in a second here. But we look at the mid-level lapse rates, and what this shows is the rate at which how fast it cools aloft. And really, for severe weather, you want to see greater than 6. But for severe weather outbreak, like what's being forecast tomorrow, you generally want to see over 7. So again, this is one of those things that you're going to see we're getting in the afternoon. We're going to see the mid-level lapse rates, they're really just not there. So that's going to make it very difficult. That's going to make it more difficult, especially for discrete, and when I say discrete, I mean isolated supercell development ahead of the line. Really, so I say, yeah, and you really need steeper lapse rates to get discrete supercell development ahead of the line, or at least have it be ideal for that. And you might have heard me mention a couple times now that the instability is not going to be that robust for this setup, and here's why. So mixed layer cape. This is probably the most important type of instability. And generally you want values greater than 1,000 for a robust severe threat. Just because you have 1,000 doesn't mean you need robust severe weather, but generally it's difficult to get it without it. However, I think today might end up being one, not today, well, tomorrow will end up being one of those days, I think. So really in the blues is where the HRRR is depicting 1,000 or higher mixed wire CAPE. And we can see that when we get into the afternoon, it struggles to, because of those poor lapse rates so off. It's not that favorable for a severe weather outbreak. However, the very strong shear at all strong shear will likely, in strong forcing, will likely overcome that and force that line of storms to mature, despite modest CAPE amounts. So we're going to see, so I showed you how there was a very strong low-level jet, and I don't remember if I showed the whole event of that, but it stays very strong the entire time, over 60 knots, even over 70 knots. So that's very favorable for tornadoes and damaging winds. If there were to be a more supercellular storm mode, which is not going to be the case with this, I don't suspect, but you would have an even more dangerous day for tornadoes. But today is still true. I keep saying today because I'm doing this late at night, but tomorrow, or if you're seeing this, so it'll be a Wednesday. You might see things on the Wednesday. Wednesday will be a very dangerous day for tornadoes. So now we're going to take a look at the bulk shear, and this is really just a good way to gauge how much mid and upper level shear you have. And we look, and you really want greater than 50 knots. And again, you can see we have very strong shear, possibly over 60 knots. This is a very strong deep wire shear environment that will favor updraft organization. Now what I'm going to be showing you next is storm relative helicity. And this is really important for forecasting tornadoes, because tornado is when the updraft turns rotating horizontal winds down onto the ground, when the updraft and downdraft work together to do that. But so you need to have those horizontal winds, that horizontal rotating vortex. And this measures that horizontal rotating vortex. And for this, you generally want greater than 154 tornado threat, 200 for strong tornadoes at the 0 to 1 kilometer, and then at 0 to 3 kilometer you want greater than 200 for tornadoes and 254 for strong tornadoes, assuming other ingredients in severe weather comply. So we can see we're going into this, and you can see it really the best values are going to be banked up along that squall line, which is again why I think that greatest tornado threat is going to exist with that squall line. What I mentioned about those poor lapse rates earlier, that's really going to suppress robust supercell development in the warm sector. I think supercells will try and form in the warm sector, but when I say warm sector, that's like the area has warm, moist air where there's going to be that instability for storms in this case ahead of the cold front. And so they're going to try and form, but I really think they're going to struggle because of that, because of the poor lapse rates. And then we're going to look at the storm relative helicity at the 3 level, and we can see very strong again. And this is why, despite there being that very weak instability, there's still going to be a robust severe weather threat tomorrow. It's actually, since the Storm Prediction Center has introduced a 5-level outlook of marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, and high, since that has been introduced, this is the largest day 2 moderate risk there is, which just shows how widespread the severe weather threat will be. And I'll try and pull that up in a little bit to show you. And this, so let's see, now, so that was one model. Now we're going to look at the NAM 3K. This is these are the 2 models I like the most for forecasting severe weather. So we're going to go back out, take a wide view nationally. We're going to start and show you what the storm shows. So again, that is the severe weather that is already ongoing at the time of recording this video. And we can see this line forms overnight in Texas. And we can see that it's very weak right there. We're going to start to zoom in on the southeast because it's about to enter that region. We want to take a closer look since that's really what we're investigating for tomorrow's severe weather. And we can see, and tomorrow, this is Wednesday on the 30th, so if you are seeing this video on Wednesday, do not think it is Thursday because I'm saying tomorrow. That is just because of the time frame of me recording this video. we can see how this line really starts to get organized across central Louisiana. And you can see this one, it's not quite as robust yet, but you can see it continues to intensify, especially that northern segment, likely due to stronger forcing. And what you can see is this one, this prefrontal line of showers forms in front of it, and that's going to make it harder, given the fact this model also shows weak instability. It's going to make it harder it might slightly limit the damaging winds threat. However, an interesting caveat is that this model shows more discrete supercells. You can see that they're not fully mature because of that very weak instability. But if slightly more instability were to develop, then this solution would be much more dangerous for tornadoes. But we're just going to look at the Cape. And this one, actually, I looked at earlier today. This is the more... I know I mentioned how the Cape is still limited, and that's still the case. Look, you're barely getting values of 1,000, but, Cape is still fairly limited on this sounding. It's much more significant than the HRRR, like I showed you, but it's still not generally what you would think with the moderate risk of severe weather, and that just truly speaks to the upper level air system that's coming together for this, and it coming down this close to the Gulf Coast to provide what will be a widespread day for severe weather. So we can see the mixed layer Cape is better than what it was. So, it would lead to a more significant day purely based off the mixed layer Cape than what the HRRR showed. But that prefrontal showers and storms that get going out in front of it, but they don't really mature into anything, that kind of contaminates the atmosphere, and it just makes it more difficult for other storms to mature. It just makes it more difficult. It just messes up the atmosphere. It makes it not as primed. So then what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the 850 jet, also known as the low level jet. You can really call them either term. You can see, and generally my value is if you're looking for a significant tornado outbreak, again, other parameters have to come together for this. But I generally look for greater than a 50 knot low level jet. And you can see that with this, we are dealing with a low level jet on this particular model run. And this is pretty common. Exactly how strong it will be and exactly how large it will be will vary model to model. But a low level jet over 60 to 70 knots, so that is very favorable and will make up for the weak instability. So that's why there is still a moderate risk for the storm prediction zone, which moderate risk may not sound that substantial, but it is. So a moderate risk, it's a 4 out of 5 severe weather threat. So again, a moderate risk may not sound that significant, but it is. That means that you're either dealing with what could be, in this case, a long-lived line of storms capable of producing significant damaging winds per the Storm Prediction Center greater than 74 miles per hour, and as well as strong tornadoes in this. Strong tornadoes. And a strong tornado is defined as a tornado that is rated EF2 or higher, just for reference. So we can see, going back, you can see this is a very strong sheared environment, and that's what's making up for the lack of instability. So then we saw the instability, again, it was lacking, but not quite as much as on the HRRR. So now we're gonna go look at the lapse rates. And again, we're just going to compare them. We know they're not going to be great for this setup, but, we just want to see the different outcomes. And we can see that this one actually has some better lapse rates, but notice how they still weaken as the storms are out here. And this is a little better lapse rates. It's definitely interesting that this shows this. This is definitely more than what the HRRR shows, and overall the NAM has been slightly more aggressive with lapse rates, but still, this is generally not that conducive for a severe weather outbreak. Definitely conducive for severe weather, but still a limiting factor. And these greater lapse rates is definitely why there is greater mixed layer Cape showing up. So this is something we're gonna have to watch to see, because if this were to happen and there weren't to be those showers and thunderstorms ahead of the line that would otherwise weaken it, then this would lead to a more substantial event. And so again, now for the sake of comparison, we're going to be looking at the storm relative helicity values again. Again, this is the horizontal motion that a thunderstorm can transfer down into a tornado. You want values, really in this case over 200 for strong tornadoes. You can see that they get going, and really right along that squall line, you can see it and see how it really ramps up. I mean, these are very strong values. You know, I don't know if these localized amounts of 400, 500 will verify, but just look at this widespread of over 300. And, I mean, if we're looking over 200 favorable for strong tornadoes, then over 300, that's very favorable. And again, that's why this is going to be making up for the lack of instability. It's not, there's not zero instability, but it's a lot less than what you would expect. And again, you can see that storm relative helicity 0 to 3 kilometers are even more crazy. I will say sometimes this model is a bit aggressive with storm relative helicity values I found, but either way, both models predict storm relative helicity values favorable for strong tornadoes, and that's really got to be the takeaway from this. And now we're going to look at the shear aloft. And again, we're going to see that in the afternoon, very strong wind fields come in that are very favorable for damaging winds, tornadoes. I will say because of the poor lapse rates, it's going to be in the storm mode. You're not going to see too many instances of severe hail. Would not surprise me if there's maybe only a couple reports of severe caliber hail tomorrow. Severe caliber hail is greater than quarter size. Quarter size or greater hail. Yeah, so we're just going to look at the temperatures now. We're going to see they warm into the 70s, maybe not quite as warm across Mississippi as on the HRRR, but that instability is made up for with those slightly steeper lapse rates. And we're going to look at the dew point now. And we're going to see that, again, also part of what leads to that less instability is the fact that there's not as much mixing. So that other model showed, remember, only low to mid 60 dew points. Now we have widespread mid 60 dew points. So the combination of the richer low level moisture and the stronger lapse rates aloft is leading to greater instability, which again, barring that prefrontal line of showers and storms, would make the severe threat more robust. So, yes, that's something. It's a pretty big takeaway from this. So I kept mentioning the Storm Prediction Center issuing a moderate risk. So here it is. This is the area of the moderate risk. So we can see a 15% significant for tornadoes. And the way I know that is this hatched area. That means potential for strong tornadoes greater than a 10% chance within a 25-mile radius. And then the 15% means 15% chance within a 25-mile radius. And again, that may not sound too high, but that's significant. I mean, your average day there being tornadoes within 25 miles of a radius. Let's say it was 1%. And this is on that Storm Prediction Center page, by the way. You can check it out yourself. You know, if it's 15 times the value on an average day, which if your average day is 1%, that would still be very, very high. That's 15 times your greatest severe tornado threat. So that's very significant. And I mean, damaging winds, this is self-explanatory. For a 45% chance of damaging winds within a 25-mile-hour radius, that's basically a 50-50 shot. And then, in this case, the significant is for winds greater than 74 miles per hour. And then again, because of those poor lapse rates in a line of storms, you're not going to see too much hail. It's that 5% chance within a 25-mile radius. So we talked about that, and now we're going to bust over to day 3. You can see that there's a fairly large very large 1 out of 5 threat, and that's indicated by green in the marginal, and then a 2 out of 5, and that's the 2 areas of slight risk. And that's mostly for damaging winds, it appears, based on what I can see from the forecast models, as well as the Storm Prediction Center's wording. So what we're now going to look at is, we're going to transition into now Thursday, the 31st. And we can see how the dew points, and you can see how we're going to focus on the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast setup first. And I'm in the Northeast. I'll say from my experience, you really just need... So in March, Northeast doesn't get significant severe weather. That would be a very rare event to get significant severe weather. But really, if we get mid to upper 50s dew points, a lot of times there's end up being at least a risk for thunderstorms and severe weather, and maybe a low-end risk of severe weather, just because in the early season, generally, the environment upper level is going to be there. So you see, we have dew points mid to upper 50s, maybe even scraping 60. So we look at this and we think, oh, there might be, you can kind of see the frontal boundary there, even on the dew point map. So we look and we're going to see the storms, and this is actually an overnight, there's a winter weather advisory for a lot of these areas. That's a wintry mix showing up. That's not the main story right now. The main story is the severe weather. And we can see these are some morning showers coming through. And you can see in the afternoon, you can see these storms. So there's the cold front back here over eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania. Eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania. And we can see that these storms begin to fire, and you can see how they mature. There's kind of two separate areas right now, and you can see how they mature. And we're just going to check it. We're going to do what's called checking a sounding. And you can see that there's not the SFC is surface-based cape. ML is mixed weather cape. In general, you can see it's very weak. Like, this is not a robust severe threat by any means, though damaging winds and if enough instability develops, and that's a big if, an isolated tornado would also be possible. And we look further south, let's look further south. So we can see that it's that same line of storms, but it's lost a lot of its energy, and again, some instances of damaging winds will be possible, but you can see how this tends to lose its definition and organization. So, I think that's going to be about it. Now, actually, one more thing I wanted to show you. So, this stands for the SB cape, that surface-based cape, in photographs. And what photographs are, these are these things showing up. And generally, for tornadoes, you want a long looping photograph. And so we can see, what we're looking here is we're going to see how the cape overlaps with the shaping of the photographs. And you can see how you get these fairly well-curved photographs in the warm sector. And we can just see, like, look at that. It's a very good photograph. We're just going to check where the line is there. It should be pretty far west based off the way the instability is showing up. Yeah, so let's look. 0Z. We're going to take a sounding here where there's those nice looping photographs. And we're going to see what's a particularly dangerous situation tornado sounding. You can see how those backed surface winds. And this is the same sounding there. Again, it just, when you click there, it shows up in a different area. And so you can see temperatures in the 70s, a robust low-level moisture. And we can see in this particular sounding there is sufficient, there's pretty good cape, at least for this setup. And we can see, combine that with the looping photograph, and while this is never perfect, but it's saying a strong tornado would be possible in this environment. And I in this situation, I agree with it. You can see the winds turning aloft, critical angle in the 50s, which is pretty good. It's not like incredible, but that's pretty good. So, yeah, I just wanted to show you that last thing before I wrapped it up for you. So, yeah, make sure you stay weather aware tomorrow. Always have stay weather aware always. Make sure, especially on Wednesday the 30th, you stay weather aware, especially across portions of the mid and deep south. Again, this entire area, I ended up focusing mostly in that moderate risk area today because that's the most substantial risk. But I mean, all the way up, getting pretty close to Chicago, the SBC has a marginal risk for severe weather. So this whole area has to keep an eye out. And again, I focused mostly on the southern section because that's the most significant risk, and it would take a long time to cover all of it. But yeah, stay weather aware. Multiple ways to get warnings. That way, in case one of them fails, you still get your warning. You want to make sure you know where to go. So for a tornado, you don't want to be in a mobile home. You want to be in the lowest level of your structure, away from windows. And yeah, and also tomorrow, with the straight line winds being very significant as well, you might want to treat treat some severe thunderstorm warnings, and especially across the enhanced and moderate risk areas. Again, that's like a 3 and 4 out of 5 threat as a tornado warning, because when you have 70, 80, 90 mile per hour winds, that's tornado force winds, and they can do same amount of damage. It doesn't matter if they're rotating. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up, and I'm probably gonna be uploading again tomorrow about the day 3 threat here. So stay tuned. Bye.